Pardon. Good morning and welcome back, Senator. Last week we missed you, and it was a nice show, but we certainly missed you and your commentary. This week we want to have a discussion about domestic policy and some of foreign policy that will leach into the midterm elections and what will kind of ensue through that. The battle of the two-party system, Democrat, Republican, what's really going on with that. We have a lot of different actions in different states. I know your state, Virginia, we want to have a discussion about, so let's go ahead and get into it. So good morning, Senator.
Yeah, good morning, Morgan. We have some somewhat unexpected developments, I guess, just sort of coming together. We knew they were in the works, but the outcomes have been pretty dramatic. Now, where we stood, let's go back a couple of weeks ago. It very much looked like the Republican Party was a little bit on its heels because principally the war in Iran, very unpopular. People don't like it, and not only that, but something that I tell Republicans, I'm Republican, but I tell them, look, the war in Iraq is sucking the air out of the room. So you can say, oh, well, why don't they talk about this? Why don't they talk about that? The reason is that everybody's talking about the war in Iran. Mm-hmm. And I think the situation with ICE back, weeks ago, when that was a very big thing, and the demonstrations were going on in Minneapolis. That was a time that the administration really needed to focus all of its media attention on what was going on and explain to people, here's what's going on, and this is the reason that the federal agents are there. And we had this monumental scandal with the sort of the Somali fraud network that was just devastating to the country. And all of a sudden that was zeroed out. And while the White House is focused on hosting Netanyahu and Zelensky and all of these people from across the oceans, meanwhile, we have this crisis at home. And the White House is kind of AWOL at a time when, I think a little bit of sound leadership could have said, okay, let's try to diffuse it a little bit. Let's move forward. Let's explain why it's going on. And I think the American people would say, oh, okay, yeah, that's true. I understand that. But instead, everything was, let's host Mr. Netanyahu. Let's find out what directions he's going to give us to follow in the next couple of weeks. So anyway, we went from that where, just the Republicans were really on in a very bad position, to where they've had a couple of very dramatic moves that have suddenly put them a little bit more back in the game than they were a couple weeks ago. And so there have been two huge court wins that have left the outcomes somewhat in doubt. I mean, I would say the Democrats just historically, the party out of power historically sweeps in a number of seats in the midterms. So history is certainly on the side of that happening again. But the first one I'll mention is right here. I'm in Virginia, and there was a very dramatic court decision. It's one that I expected, and I had told people that I fully expected it, but it still hit with quite a shockwave. The Virginia Supreme Court looking at Republican challenges to a very important Democrat initiative where they had decided that they would attempt to redistrict the state. Now, the redistricting only affects the U.S. Congress seats. That Virginia has 11 congressional seats in total, and the Democrats held a majority of them, but not a big majority, and it was fairly evenly split. And so the Democrats introduced new maps, and they rammed them through the legislature without complying with the constitutional requirements. And they just sort of seemed to think, okay, if we just steamroll, we can get it through. But this went to the Virginia Supreme Court, and they rendered a 4-3 decision, and they said, legislature didn't comply with the state's constitution's process. It's a multi-step process, and the process for changing the Constitution in Virginia and in other states is a complex process. It's not meant to be sort of a Byzantine thing, but it's designed to require that the voters be fully informed about what's happening before they go and vote. Mm-hmm. And so you have to pass the bill during one legislature, and then once there has been an election for, in this case, the House of Delegates, once there's been a House of Delegates election, then the newly seated House of Delegates has to pass it again, and from there it goes to the voters. So it's an involved process, and the steps are very important because you don't want to have some shift in the party, like all of a sudden the Republicans take over and the Republicans say, oh, well, let's just rejigger everything and we'll wipe out the other party, or vice versa. And so anyway, the process was not satisfied. The Virginia Supreme Court has ordered that the old congressional map be used again. And so this probably has cost, it could have cost 4 or 5 congressional seats for the Democrats that they had been counting on. So that was a very big thing. The National Public NPR online, they said that this has caused the Republicans to shoot ahead in the redistricting battle. I think that's a little bit overstated, just the way they said it. They also said the Virginia ruling will now put the GOP far ahead. I don't think that's correct. I think what it does is it helps to pull them from behind somewhat. Now, it was a huge political setback for our new governor, Governor Abigail Spanberger. She had been touted as a potential Democrat presidential candidate. She was the one who gave the response to Trump's State of the Union address. It was a little bit of a disappointing commentary she had, but in any event, she ended up tied to this decision, and in the end, she said, "I'm disappointed by the Supreme Court of Virginia and their ruling," but she's got big problems. The Democrats in Virginia have some big problems because At the same time this is going on, there was a raid conducted on the office of Senator Louise Lucas, one of the powerhouses of Virginia politics, and fortunately, the raid didn't originate just overnight. It had the investigation of the businesses of Louise Lucas began under the Biden administration, and they just had continued. And so the FBI and the Drug Enforcement Agency conducted really major raids on Senator Lucas's legislative office, and right next to it or across the street from it, she was running a marijuana shop. And marijuana is kind of semi-legal in Virginia, but there are lots of caveats. It's still a prohibited drug with the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
And in any event, there are indications that Lucas, she's the co-owner of this marijuana shop, and indications that they were playing very loose with the rules. And in any event, this certainly has been a problem. The recent legislative bodies, the Democratic folks, have really attacked moral issues. They've introduced casino gambling that was always forbidden, and loosened rules on drugs. They've put convicted felons, murderers, rapists on the voting rolls, and just really caused a significant deterioration in the moral, the legal side of the moral culture. Virginia still has a strong moral culture, but it starts with the law and then it deteriorates from there. So, in any event, this was a big blow to the Democrats. It's something that has stung. But the problem is, it comes right on the heels of a massive win for Republicans, one that's even much bigger. And this was a U.S. Supreme Court case, Louisiana versus Calais, in which they looked at a redistricting map. That there was litigation going back and forth with the state of Louisiana, and courts were trying to force them to gerrymander the state so that they could give black voters more seats in the legislature. And the U.S. Supreme Court came in and said, under the 14th Amendment, which says equal rights, that this was after the Civil War, they came in and said, okay, everybody shall be treated equally under the law. And what at that time they were trying to bring in the newly freed black slaves into full equality, full citizenship. Well, in any event, time goes on and the Voting Rights Act gets passed, and it sort of brushes over this idea of equality, and it begins to simply try to promote one race over others. And I think everybody sort of said, well, we got a lot of catching up to do. We'll just allow that to go on. But the Supreme Court over time has gotten more and more antsy about the fact that the Voting Rights Act does not comply with the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. It does not accord equality. And so they have ruled in Louisiana versus Calais that you cannot have racial gerrymanders. Race cannot play a role in how you draw the congressional districts in a state. This is a big deal because the federal courts have been a tool of the Democratic Party for really a couple of generations, where they could go in and they could say, hey, look, the fact is that black voters tend to be, one of the most highly reliable blocks of voters for the Democratic Party. So they're sort of the race and the party are one and the same. And so you would have Republicans who would say, okay, well, let's divide up this way. And right away they could jump into court and they could say, oh, look, they're diluting black strength. Whereas really what the Republicans were trying to do is to dilute the Democrat strength. That goes back and forth with both parties.
Yeah.
In any event, it's a very big shift. Some of it will play out in this election. Some of it will play out in the following one, but it's a very big deal. So that's where we stand. We've got these two big court wins, and it's all of a sudden it's sort of shifted the map a little bit. And then, of course, for the Republicans, they're more competitive, but the downside is the war in Iraq, and we can
in Iran, yeah.
In Iran, I'm sorry.
Well, Iraq was too, but
yeah, that was an earlier phase, but the Iran.
Yeah, no, certainly. I feel like both sides play in this gerrymandering, this game of how can we delve up the lines? I mean, I've gone into some congressional offices and they have their district, on blown up in a map, and it's just this weird little curve and almost looks like a river because it's just all wound and cut up in different ways. And it's a known thing that happens. I know that Tennessee, they just had this, I guess, a protest that happened within the Capitol based on kind of the same thing, that there was this redistricting map that the protesters felt like were going to actually hurt the Democrats, because I believe it carves up Memphis. I know personally, pardon me, I mean, put that back on the stage. In North Carolina, that was a big thing, a few years ago, and I think it's coming back into play this year as well with the new redistricting map that they engaged in the last election, where I think it splits up the largest historically black college in the entire nation into two districts. Seldomly money is given to that area for early voting, so it's hard to kind of have, when you don't have facilities that can run early voting, or you have it just that one day. It's a very packed and hard to get to kind of area. So I know it's this thing that continues to happen, and just kind of, I'm glad that we touched on it, because I feel like that is a big part of these election processes as well, is how do we cut these districts up. And I feel like that it's never accurately representing of the people as a whole, as much as it's just both parties engage in this kind of tactic of how can we carve up these little places. And
it's important for people to understand that the Supreme Court decision doesn't end gerrymandering. All it does is it ends racial gerrymandering. So, for example, here in Virginia, the Democrat attempt would have had, I don't know, a bunch of the different districts, all dominated by the big population center in Fairfax County. So they ran lines all over the place like spaghetti.
Yeah.
That in itself would not have been unlawful. It's the fact that they didn't follow the constitutional provisions to change the Constitution. Because here in Virginia, ironically, the Democrats, when they weren't so powerful, they pushed for a constitutional amendment that set up a supposedly nonpartisan commission that would try to design districts that had communities of interest and common themes, and it actually made some sense.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if you kind of had the sole power, like a nice one, how would you dictate how districts are cut up?
Well, one of the things is communities of interest. The other thing is sort of logical geographical boundaries. For example, you in a county that has to be split up, rather than splitting it among 3 districts, if you could have that county all in one district, that would sort of be favorable. It's pretty complex, but I think Virginia, the Republicans and the Democrats working together came up with a pretty good solution, and it's the system that we operate under today. But I think the Supreme Court, they have to follow the Constitution, and so they can't just say, well, here's how everybody's going to redistrict from now on. In this case, what they could say is you cannot redistrict in order to favor one race over another race. The 14th Amendment makes that clear. And so that's the piece that they dealt with, and we'll be wrestling over how to draw maps, when you're a lot older than I am now. So in any event, that's where we stand now. Okay. If we could just take a look now at Iran and how this is going to impact things.
Yeah, so there's Iran is it's very tricky because it's we don't know if the talks are legitimate. Like there's a talk that's going to happen, or it just happened yesterday. But could you maybe get us up to speed on what's taken place? I know that the Iran and the U.S. they're still kind of at this stalemate of the Strait of Hormuz is not open, which puts the entire globe in a strain, given the resources that come out of the Strait of Hormuz. We talked about the petroleum, the fertilizer. I know that vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol, those products go in so many different shampoo, or for people who are trying to cut off cigarettes, the vapes and stuff like that. And I believe that has gone up 200%, those 2 product lines, which they're used in so many different areas that we don't acknowledge, but that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz. And I believe the vegetable glycerin comes out of Myanmar, which is suffering a civil war right now. So you have all these different precious resources that are being strained by conflict. What the most notable that we are kind of helping engage with is the Strait of Hormuz. So I want to pass it to you and kind of get you.
Yeah. We're somewhere around 60 days now since we launched a surprise attack on Iran, an unprovoked surprise attack together with Israel. It's very much like the attack on Pearl Harbor. And Netanyahu had convinced President Trump that if we just bombed and killed a lot of people in Iran, that the people would rise up and say, "Hallelujah, you're the savior. We love the fact that you're dropping bombs on us, and we're going to overthrow our government, and we'll be waving palms at the streets when Netanyahu and Trump walk down the streets of Tehran." The fact is, history shows us that bombing attacks unite the people. They always have.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at what happened in the Battle of Britain. The Luftwaffe launched an enormous aerial attack on Britain to try to bring them to heel and finally get agreement with them on what was going on in Europe. And Hermann Göring was the great general of the Luftwaffe. Well, when we started bombing, the British fought back with what they had. They had their Spitfire aircraft that would take up to the air, and they'd go and they'd fight, and they'd shoot down some of the German planes, and some of theirs would get shot down. Well, when this happened, there actually was a degree of sympathy within Great Britain for the Nazi government. There was a lot of sentiment, so that it was divided. And as soon as Germany started bombing, the people of Great Britain united, and Churchill was saying, "This is our finest hour," and it was very dramatic. Same thing exactly happened at Pearl Harbor. There was a very strong anti-war sentiment within the United States. I mean, it was very entrenched. As soon as the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, it was just a shockwave. And the next day, nobody could speak in favor of having good relations with Japan or Germany. And if we only could divorce ourselves from this drumbeat of propaganda,
Mm-hmm.
certainly, I have no doubt that the Central Intelligence Agency understood that when we attacked Iran by air, when we, in the midst of peace negotiation, we suddenly launched this surprise attack. I mean, very much a Pearl Harbor style attack, mm-hmm. or a Luftwaffe attack in the Battle of Britain that unites the people. And I spoke with a fellow, and I've mentioned this on there before. He is an Iranian American, great, pro-American guy. His parents are Iranian Americans, and they were living in Tehran at the time. They were not too favorable towards the government. They definitely were among the people who wanted change. But he was talking with his mother on the phone, and just talking about this and that, and all of a sudden she screamed and the phone went dead. And for the next couple of weeks he was in a panic, what's going on. And that was at the moment that Israel was bombing and assassinating people all over the country. And what had happened is there was a big apartment complex across the street, and there was one individual that the Israelis wanted to kill, and they killed everybody in the entire apartment complex. And when this fellow finally got phone contact with his mother again, she said that she had been standing by the window when the blast occurred, and she was blown across the room and cut all over by flying glass. And the father of this fellow was blown against the wall, and it broke all of his ribs, his whole rib cage. And these were people who were kind of on our side until then. And so I asked this guy, I said, well, did they give you some idea what is this, what's the talk on the streets there in Tehran? How are the people reacting? And he said, this is united all Iranians. Mm-hmm. They're all behind their government. They're all ready to stand up and resist the aggression that's hitting their country. It's the way it works. It works. I don't care. You could be talking about a surprise attack on Canada or a surprise attack on China or on Japan. It doesn't matter. That's the way people react. So it's going to be generations before the present government changes. It's not going to change. It may not change in your lifetime. It certainly won't change in my lifetime. And we did that. I think the ground was very fertile in Iran before this attack to gradually.
I would say, you bring up a great point. I mean, if we could just imagine for a second, if Pearl Harbor had actually, it was on mainland and they successfully assassinated the United States president, FDR. I mean, it would be, there would be this uniting effort to go get vengeance, for a lack of a better term. And that's exactly what happened in Iran. Not only that, is that we continued, and Israel continued to take out the successors or people that we were in talks with, leading, and we had spoken about this weeks ago, leading to a more a room for a more like radical leader to emerge that would actually aspire to have a nuclear weapon. We spoke about this weeks ago. The current Ayatollah and fatwa that was in place stated that the nuclear weapons were against their proposed values, and therefore they would not seek it. Our CIA in the 2025 threat assessment policy that they put out even stated that they find that very credible. You had Joe Kent even resigning from his position, the counterterrorism sector of the CIA, stating that he knew full well that the intelligence that the president was getting was faulty, that there was this imminent attack going to be placed on the American citizens, and he suspected that it was coming from the Israelis. Yes. So I think these are all very, very important to note, especially when you continue to attack the people you're talking to. We spoke about it a few weeks ago, after the talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, that there was this escort that the Pakistani military actually engaged in because of the credible threats that Israel would strike down the Iranian peace negotiators.
Yeah, so just this week, they set up some kind of a board that's supposed to govern, I guess, the economics of Gaza. And so Hamas had one of their negotiators who was part of the board. The Israelis murdered him. So everybody that we can deal with, they murder, in the idea that, well, this will make the other side helpless. It hasn't. What's happened is in Iran, we call them radicals, but they really were very moderate, relatively speaking, and there were things they wouldn't do and this sort of thing. Well, we murdered. It's not murder when you kill enemy combatants, but it's certainly considered murder under international law when you kill civilian leadership, which Israel, they don't give a rip about international law. They never have. and but they've killed off the moderate, the older, people who say, yeah, I really don't want to go through this, and they have replaced them with young, vibrant, savvy people who are not nearly as gullible. I mean, it was amazing that they were attacked in the midst in the 12-day war. They were attacked in the midst of peace negotiations.
Well, yeah.
The negotiations were used as a pretext to lull them into complacency and kill them. And we did that. Israel principally, but then along comes this event, and we're conducting peace negotiations, and it was, the whole thing was a pretext, and I suspect, and I don't have proof of this, but I suspect that our negotiators told theirs that we might just agree to this particular proposal, coordinate it with your people. And they went back and there was a meeting with the Ayatollah and a considerable number of very top officials. They did it sort of as a daytime meeting, which was unprecedented, but I think they felt that they could depend on us, that we would observe the peace and give them the time to check this out with this fly with the Iranian people. And then we and the Israelis used that attack to conduct basically a mass murder of the people. And that was the time when we also attacked and killed all the little girls at the girls' school.
Knob school, yeah. What I found was really interesting that the Iranians were coming out and saying was during the first Islamabad talks was that when J.D. Vance was he was initially the one that was there, that they found that it was a very productive talk, that there was, concessions on both sides. There was this real diplomacy happening. And that everything kind of unfolded when you had Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff come into the room, and they just blew up the whole peace negotiation with their firm stance on no concessions and just, you give us full surrender, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. J.D. Vance doesn't like all of the warfare, and he would probably not be Israel's first choice of people to be in the negotiations. They have a lot of insiders consider Jared Kushner and Witkoff to be essentially, not really, but essentially like Israeli agents. They're not representing the interests of the American people. They're focused on Israel. Now the Iran war is very unpopular, and it has
unpopular on both sides of the aisle. Last week we missed you, but I kind of gave a recap into the House and the Senate hearings that the Department of War was engaging to try and push for this $1.5 trillion budget, which they got. Because we really have a uniparty when it comes to pushing more war. There was very little opposition to actually attacking what was going on in Iran, the objectives. The Republicans mainly had this site of rearmament, questions on rearmament, and somewhat tepid kind of trying to pry more information on Pete Hegseth on the exact objectives of the Iran war. You had a little more of I guess maybe for lack of a facade of an anti-war engagement in Iran on the Democratic side. Of course, it kind of came from more of a partisan angle. They just had the War Powers resolution at the House, narrowly just did not pass by one Democratic vote. what are your, I don't know if you were able to catch some of the last week's episode on what we kind of discussed, or even caught some of the hearings. So what was your kind of takeaway on, this blowing up of the Pentagon's budget? We know from the first Trump administration that required all of these government agencies to commit an audit on themselves every year. It's the Pentagon that is consistently the one that cannot pass an audit, that upwards some years won't be able to attribute 60% of where their money is going. And they just got another increase to the tune of $1.5 trillion.
Yeah, well, I just comment on that. Jumping from a $1 trillion budget to $1.5 trillion budget, I've done some fairly extensive work on that, and what that does to our deficit. Right now we have 37 trillion. That single change will increase the deficit by somewhere around $8 trillion. It is a massive increase in the deficit. And, all of the figures that we've worked on have dealt with the net present value of the stream of costs that go on in the future. Once you re-benchmark the normal rate that the Pentagon gets, and you increase it by 50%, that goes on. It doesn't just stop and then it's, we'll do this 1 year and then everything's fine. No, you build that in, and then that's a cost that drains the life's blood of the American economy from that point forward forever. And so it is a disastrous move. And it's fantasy to imagine that the reason for this isn't to increase the pace of warfare, to prepare for bigger, better wars all over the globe. That's what we're doing. We're increasing our arms. We're modernizing our arms. We're promoting Europe to get ready for a nuclear war with Russia. We've got bozo people who are talking about war with China as though, we'll whip up on them just like we whipped up on Venezuela. So we're at a time when it comes to foreign military policy of almost total lunacy. We've just become so detached from reality. But
there was it was kind of a war correspondent that was kind of breaking down the elements that that progressed into the First World War and how he kind of sees the similarities. And one of the main ones is this capture of precious resources, the instability of the markets that we're likely seeing today. We have our common friend Jose Vega, who has been busted into different political rallies, screaming as much, saying that there's this three-front, world war that's going to take place, where it's Ukraine, Taiwan, and now you have, Israel, and they're conducting their just bullying of every nation that borders them and taking on their land. We have I brought a video from, you would think it was from Gaza, but it's actually from Lebanon. And, we said previous shows that Israel now is occupying more land than Russia is occupying in Ukraine.
It's quite hideous what they do. If you compare what they do with the war that's taking place in Ukraine, there's been a lot of destruction in Ukraine back and forth as they fight, but it's methodical with the Israelis. Their desire, their intent is to exterminate all human life so that they can send their settlers in, and the Jewish settlers can occupy and steal all of the lands that belong to other people. They're driving out Christians, they're driving out Muslims, they're driving out everyone who is not a Jewish settler, and it's become such a horrific thing that we have situations like the one we had just recently that New York Times reported on, where you had the shepherd with his family, and 20 Israeli settlers just invaded his home, uh, beat everyone, beat the children, beat the elderly, the grandparents, and they stripped him naked in front of his family. They zip tied his penis. They beat him and they dragged him across the rocks. He thought he was going to die, and the picture that they had in the New York Times showed his one eye was all bloodied over. It was inside, and it was all thoroughly reported and thoroughly documented. They made reports to the police, but the Israeli police, who they govern the place, they never prosecute. It doesn't matter how horrific. There are murders that are done there routinely, murders of the Christian Palestinians, murders of the Muslim Palestinians. The Jewish settlers despise, they just hate any other human beings, and they're greedy, and they want those people's lands and property to be their own. So this gang of 20, and I'm going to tell you, there is in no way can those settlers claim to be morally superior to the Nazis who were involved in the Holocaust and the Kristallnacht thing. When you start zip tying people's penises, and the family subsisted on a herd of 400 sheep. They were shepherds, just like in Jesus's time. And the settlers stole all 400 sheep. They got them out of there. They stole all of the money. They stole the wedding rings. They forced them. They kicked the wife in the mouth. She had gone to get her head scarf, so that she could be modest, and the settlers took it, threw it down, and he was kicking her and yelling, "Die, die!" I mean, horrific stuff. So
yeah, we're constantly told, in the realm of the propaganda that comes out of Israel, why we must support these actions, that, okay, well, they're American values, or I guess Western and Christian values, don't align with the Muslim faith, with Islam. But you accurately stated that they are very violent towards Christians as well. This new video has surfaced from about a week ago where it was a French nun who was attacked by an Israeli in broad daylight. So this is not a rare occurrence, and
no, it's very common, and it's people who have followed this for generations have known. See, here he is, just kicking a nun in the street in front of everybody. Nobody cares.
Yeah, she was an elderly nun too, and French. She wasn't, she was not an Israeli national or a Palestinian national, or a Palestinian. She was, but I believe the French government has come out and they've condemned this action. They said it is heinous what has occurred. But imagine what happens when the cameras aren't rolling. I mean, we were fortunate to get that on basically a CCTV camera that went viral, but there are so many more occurrences that have taken place. What's going on in Lebanon right now, I believe they just bombed the mausoleum of Simon Paul. Is completely destroyed. That's something that's over 1,000 years old. History that long precedes even the inception of this current state of Israel. Just the continuing of just destruction that has extended their tentacles far beyond their borders is absolutely reprehensible. And the American government has continue to tie itself to it is also kind of just unbelievable, in my opinion.
Yeah. The day that American values sink as low as Israeli values, I'm going to be out of this country, and I think most decent people will want to do something different, because I don't care what moment of American history you look at, the worst things that ever occurred, American values have never sunk to the depths that you have in Israel these days. Now, getting back to our situation with the elections, the Iran war is the one thing. If that is still going on, there will be an absolute wipeout of the party in power. It's not that the Democrats are against war. They love war. They create so many of the wars that we have. Mm-hmm. But for now, if the American people are going to do something, they're going to do it against the party that's controlling the strings of power. So,
yeah, I would say that their opposition is very lackluster. I think the credible and most notable opposition that needs to kind of be highlighted here is this bipartisan push between Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, who are continually pushing for this War Powers Resolution Act that continues to fail. Like I just said, it failed last time just by one Democratic vote. So it's this bipartisan push that, of course, the veil will be pulled over the Americans' eyes, and they might see some kind of gleaming light in the Democrats by their, half-talked answer of why this was unjust, even though, the American people overwhelmingly voted for Trump in the ambition that he was the peace president. And I want to see your insight. I know that we have yet to feel the true impacts of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. We had Spirit Airlines closed due to, they said that they could no longer afford the gas to put in their airplanes. They kind of attribute that to the price hikes that we've seen. We kind of just talked about some of the other precious resources that go into products that we use on a daily life, far beyond the gas that we put in our car, that is also affected by this trade. Do you see that those impacts are almost irreversible to the point that they will be felt in November?
There's going to be a big increase in food prices. That's baked in. At this point, I'm not sure that there's anything that can be done, because there's a limited amount of food in the world. 30% of all the world's fertilizer is trapped in the Straits of Hormuz. And right now, planting is going on in India and throughout Asia. Planting is going on in the United States. And in all of these places, they're having to reduce the amount of fertilizer, because that's sort of the biggest ongoing cost for farmers, between that and the cost of of diesel fuel for their tractors and so forth. That's where the costs are. The costs are high, so they're going to plant less and they're going to use less fertilizer. This is going to have a very profound effect on Africa. It's going to cause starvation there, and that's going to inspire waves of migration, and that's going to hit the European shores. It's going to cause all sorts of problems there. Now, so it is if this war just continues, the Republicans are going to be wiped out. I think that's a given. If the war can be ended, there's a tremendous pressure on Trump right now to end it. The problem is that Netanyahu wants American boots on the ground, so that we're tied to fighting in Iran for the next 3 generations. That's the ultimate goal that they want. They haven't been able to get it. There's, the Democrats they're having all sorts of internal frictions because they're divided. There's the very pro-Israel group of the party, and there's the tremendous antipathy towards Israel by many members of their party. So they're split. Interestingly, we're both very familiar with the Democratic challenge being launched by Jose Vega to a very long-serving Congressman, Richie Torres. Now, Richie Torres represents the poorest congressional district in the nation, and interestingly, his biggest single contributor is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, which dominates Congress and which really dictates U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And so Jose Vega is getting out there. He's highlighting how little concern Torres has for his own constituents. And I know Torres, and I believe even you were there when they went into a high-rise, low-cost building there for kind of government subsidized, and there was just one elevator for this huge building, and even while Torres was going up to see the top of the building, the elevator broke down, and he had to work on trying to get it fixed.
Yeah. Jose was there during that altercation, and he witnessed the elevator breaking down. It was a very heartbreaking thing to see. The building was solely dedicated to the elderly. And speaking to the people, they wait often 45 minutes to an hour every single day of their lives to use that elevator, mostly because that's the only resources they can. They can't use the steps anymore because their old age and their ailments. So it was a very, very tragic thing. But it's more tragic the fact that is not a one-off situation. It's a common occurrence. The lack of adequate and secure housing that Richie Torres seems to be very complacent with, given his 6-year rule in the Congress.
Yeah, so, I don't think he has any great concern for his constituents, and I think this is a similar situation with a number of politicians in the inner cities where they get their money from the AIPAC and from other political action committees, and then the people just continue to be overlooked, and it's a shame. And I hope that there could be a new wave. I'm not a Democrat, but I have a heart for people wherever they are, and I just hope that they're able to get people who will do something more than just whip people into a frenzy of, well, we hate this group or hate this group, and instead focus on the nuts and bolts of trying to make people's lives better, trying to restore law and order. Without law and order, you cannot function as a culture. People cannot improve themselves because they're too busy trying to stay alive. And so we'll see what happens. I think we're getting closer. The countdown is on for the elections.
Midterms,
and I
was reminded when you were speaking about the agriculture, the strains that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is going to bring globally. In America alone, this year it is projected that 175,000 farmers are going out of business.
Wow.
This comes at a time where the current statistic is, I think it's like 2 farmers a day commit suicide because they are insolvent on their debts.
Mm.
They seek no way out. That just kind of leaves room for major corporations, that they kind of swoop in and they capture the small farmer that was, using, you know, you would rather have small, time farmer food fed to you over than the large corporation that is pumping out and spraying their products to kind of generate more of a yield every year. It's healthier for you. We all know that, and this kind of consolidation is very methodical and it doesn't serve the American people. And I think that also will be in addition to the raising of food prices when you see that you have all these farmers going out of business. So I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of add that because that made me remember that was a big thing. I think there was a farmer protest given the new push for glyphosates, which glyphosates was a big thing that kind of came out of the Trump administration, the MAHA movement, with the addition of Robert Kennedy Jr. coming along, was this movement that was strictly against glyphosates. And we kind of see this more in the media now where we're saying that, no, we should be able to use them. Within that protest, they kind of divulged that over 175,000 farmers will be closing their operations this year. So I think that kind of brings us to a nice conclusion of the show. Thank you so much, Senator, for all your insight and your analysis today. And I will encourage everybody to tune in next week to focus on the news.
Okay. Thank you so much.